Okay, good morning. So up to Shin Chof Ches Seif Chof, working through Hilchas Refuah. Today's some interesting stuff. It's just to do with various medications. Many of them have not in practice nowadays. Let's take a look. Says the Mechaber Seif Chof, Ein Noisnin Yayin L'Seicha Ayin. You're not allowed to put wine in the eye on Shabbos, because in those days they would do that as a refuah. V'litno al gabav, to put it over the eye and it drips somehow into it, that would, or in poisech v'segeh ayin osa, if you're actively opening and closing the eye so that it trickles in, that's not allowed. V'meinu poisech v'segeh but muta, but if it just drips in sort of naturally without you doing anything, that would be okay. V'roik tofel, we'll see with Mishmur, that means roik, when you wake up in the morning before you wash your mouth or brush your teeth, it's sort of very strong, concentrated type of roik. And again, in those days, they would put it in the eye as some sort of refuah. The roik tofel afidu al gabav also, it's putting it on top of the eye is not allowed. The mukha milsa the refuah of it, because it's evident that you are doing it l'shem refuah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Samach Daled, the soicha ayin, the kol mili tehula refuah, God's Rabbanon Mishum Shchika Samonim. As we've said before, anything Chazal, anything which is l'shem refuah, Chazal prohibited, because you might come to grind and crush things, which is the way they did the medication in those days. If you look at 69, he says, "Mashikosav le'el shebecholi ha'ayin." You might think that, hey, previously, b'choli ha'ayin yesh sakonas nefesh u'mutzah lechalel loves haShabbos afam locha d'oraisa. Remember, we said previously that with eye ailments, there are things, we're worried that it might have effects on the heart, and therefore you can even do deraisas. Bia b'sheina halachas, that's Rabbi Chaim shekan meduba b'soif ha'choli. Here we're talking about the end of the ailment. Sort of your eye infection is sort of just clearing up, and therefore there's less of a concern. So here we're talking about a case where it's not life-threatening. If it was life-threatening, then of course then you can do whatever you need to do. Samachei in Poseach. So we said that if you you can't put the wine in the eye, that's because that's a refuah, and if you put it on top of the eye, if you actively open and close the eye so that it comes in, that's not allowed. Says the Mishnah Berurah Samachei, Kadei she'yikonis l'soicha, because you're doing something so that the wine should enter the eye. The oz the mukha milsa the refuah isa, because there it's evident you're doing it the shem refuah, and that's not allowed. However, if you just let it run into the eye, then muta. Says the Mishnah Berurah Samachvav, Da'amrinan you're just washing your face, and people would do that in those days with wine and things like that. But now, of course, we don't wash our faces with wine. Also, that is not allowed anymore, because you're obviously doing it the shem refuah, and that's prohibited. V'roik tofel, what is that? Kol shelei to'am klum mishener. You haven't tasted anything when you woke up. Shehu chazak, and therefore it's very potent. And therefore, if you take that strong spittle and you put it in your eye, you're doing it l'shem refuah. Also, because if it's just purely for washing, that's pretty disgusting. If you wash your mouth out with water and then you sort of take that liquid and put it over your eye, shari, that would be allowed. Even though there's a bit of spit in it, because people think you're doing it l'shem rechitza. If your eyes sort of, there's some mucus from the eye and your eyes are shut together and you want to take a bit of spit just to wipe it away, that would be okay. De'ein zeh refuah, that's not really refuah. Okay. Chof Aleph. Sheire Adam Kilorin Me'er Shabbos. So it's not clear, I'm not clear what this kilorin is. I looked up the Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Ches, and it says there in the Art Scroll footnotes, we're not clear what it is. So I got Nechama. I know, I think in Ivrit, kilorin is chlorine, no? I'm not sure what it is, but if you Sheire Adam Kilorin Me'er Shabbos, V'noisra al Gafa Ayin B'Shabbos, it's some sort of plant or medication that they would put in water and then you would put it on your eye on Shabbos. She'ein nira ele kareichitz. That's okay because it's just like washing. V'hu d'lo omitz or posach, so long as you're not opening and shutting your eye, because then it looks like you're doing it the shem refuah. In this situation, we're not worried about shchika samonim, grinding things. Since the whole heta is, if you started soaking on Erev Shabbos, there's your heta, and therefore it's okay. All right, it says in Mishnah Berurah Samaches, kilorin, v'dafka bekilor solul. This clear killer, again, I'm not sure what it is. She'oz nira karoichetz, because then it looks like you're washing. Aval ba'ava. If it's thick, it's not allowed. Or kamesh cause of simon ration base if hey. Samachtes, V'loi Chashinan, Rotzolema Duhu HaYodeh Dal Refuah Atzmai. Sorry, I've jumped the line. V'hu HaYodeh Dal Refuah Kovid, because then it's clear you're doing it l'shem refuah. Afal Pikein, L'didei Ikei HaKeira Dem Melchach L'shoysim Erev Shabbos. Since you had to soak this stuff in Erev Shabbos, there's enough of a heka that it's not l'shem refuah. But Tzorech Loima Dohad D'lei Choshu B'Seif Chof Mishum Hu Atzmai, that it itself should be also Shani Hosam to Kimish Derech Licher. It's beyayin letanug ba'alma. People sometimes would wash their face with wine. It's a tanug lekach leka mishum chashash klal. There's no concern. Avol ha'chash enesim kein el refuah tzarech keira, and therefore you need to soak it from erev Shabbos. Chof beis mavirin gildei hamako v'sochen oso b'shemen. Interesting. So imagine a person had some sort of graze, and you've got a scab which is sort of formed over the opening. So if you're allowed, so long as you're not going to cause bleeding, and it's dried up, and it's at the very end stages, mavirin gildei hamaka, you're allowed to remove the scab of the wound, v'sochin oisa b'shemen, and you can apply oil to that place, avoloi b'chelev, but not fats, not sort of like a Vaseline KY jelly, that type of thing, mipnei shehu nimoyach, because that will melt and that will spread, v'afidu b'gmar maka, and even at the end of the makkah where there's a little bit of tzar, it's allowed. It's in other words with shemen, but not with chelev. But what you cannot do is put oil and water together, because that's more l'shem refuah. Nor can you put it on some sort of bandage or material or cloth to put it on top of it. You can put it outside of the makkah, and if it drips down, then that would be okay. So let's see the detail in Mishnah Berurah, because this has application. A person sometimes has chapped lips on Shabbos. It's often a question asked, what can you do with chapped lips? So generally speaking, to put Vaseline or KY jelly or these sort of creams on your lips is a problem, because it's memareach. But to put some oil, sometimes that soothes it a little bit. But not to put it on it, but to put it a bit above and it drips down, that would be okay. That's what emerges from this. But let's see. V'sochin oisa, says the Mishnah Berurah, sif katan ayin. So you are allowed to remove the scab, so long as it's not causing bleeding, and you can put some oil on that place. Because in those days people would ordinarily anoint themselves to sicha with shemen, and therefore it's not a shem refuah. It's not a medical type of procedure. It's just ablutions. V'loi mukcha milsa the refuah of it, and therefore it's not evident that you're doing it l'shem refuah. V'ayim mashikosav haramah b'simen shin chav zayin sif aleph b'hagah l'inyan medinasenu u'mistaber d'gmar makkah b'gam d'nsenu shari b'shemen. And it seems that so long as the makkah is at the very end of its life, it's sort of the scab is healing up and it's just removing the crusty bit, which is just not going to cause any bleeding. It's all dried up. Then it would seem, even in our times and in our places, it would be allowed to put some oil on that place just to smooth it over and to soften it up. If you look at 73, he says, sometimes you can have chapped hands, you've got a bit of eczema or something, and to put some oil on your hands, that the skin doesn't come too dry. Shemuta, if you want to put a bit of oil, olive oil or something, and you put it on, rub it in your hands, that's actually allowed on Shabbos. I don't think that's so well known, and it's quite useful if you've got some your skin is very dry. But to anoint children, babies on Shabbos, again that's allowed. So to put some baby lotion or baby oil on a kid on Shabbos, that is also okay. But not to put any chelev, which is fats, which is like a more sort of solid type of material. If it was congealed, the domi lechelev, which is like chelev, you can't do that. The lekatzara el tanug ba'alma came to Orach Rotzolema after b'mehema also mishum tanug ba'alma, even to put it on an animal. Even if on an animal not, but an odam would be okay. What is this going on? You can put oil on, but not a mixture of water and oil, because the Bezeh says Mishnah Berurah Gimel, the Bezeh Milsa Shel Refuah, that seems to be a bit therapeutic, which is not allowed. Muravin Yachad, V'chamin Levad, but just to put water on yourself, Mashma Magen Avram Deshari Kamei Shemen Levad. Yeah, you want to just put some warm water or whatever, just some water on it. Of course, no bishul issues. Then that would also be allowed. V'lo al gabi meich, but you can't put it on a cloth. Even just warm or water, even just which of course has been heated up before Shabbos, even that is gamkein osa bishum schita, because you can't wet any beged on Shabbos because of schita. But to put a bit of oil, so long as it's not squeezing out, so long as just put a bit of oil on a cloth and just to put it on it, or to put the oil on your body and to cover it with a cloth, that would be okay. To ein kibbutz b'shemen, where you don't launder generally with oil. Okay, litnu aleha. What is that going on? V'lo al gabi meich litnu aleha. But you can't put the oil on top of the material to put it onto your wound. V'uadin im hameich hayanosen mikodim al hamaka. And so too, if the bandage was already on the wound, you can't do it. Gamkein also litin aleha chamin v'shemen or chamin l'chud. So sorry, shemen yes, but not chamin and shemen, and not chamin l'chud, not chamin on its own. Avol noisein, what was that going on? Avol noisein hu chutz lemaka. You can put it on sort of outside of the wound. V'sheises v'yerid l'seicha, and then the liquid would sort of drip down. That's okay. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah in Zion, de lo mukcha milsa de refuah, because again it's not clear that it's l'shem refuah, and therefore that's okay. So that's quite a useful thing to note, that if you've got very dry hands or dry chapped lips, you can't put the liquid directly on it, but if you put it outside of it and it drips down, that would be okay. Or to just or on the hands, just to smear your hands with oil like that, that would be acceptable. But not to add any water, nothing which is more sort of a solid nature, but something only liquid. Okay. Chaf Gimel. Noislin sefeig v'chatich chos begadim yeveshim. You're allowed to put a sfeig, which is a sponge, v'chatiches begadim, and bits of cloth, yeveshim, dried pieces of cloth, v'chadoshim, and new ones, she'ein l'refuah. You can put those on your body, so that your clothes won't scratch the makkah. So imagine you've got some sort of wound and you want to just protect it and you want to put some sort of bandage on it. That's okay. But you can't put old bandages, because they have ointment on it and things like that, and that's the problem of refuah. But just to put material there to just cushion it, that's okay. Those are only yeshonim, old bandages, which have never been put on the makkah. If they've already been placed on, they've already been used. Even old ones are okay. The shuv einu merapim, because they're no longer going to be merapeh. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ayin Ches v'chadoshim Ayin betaz shekosav dahayt v'chadoshim lo koi asfeig. It's not talking about the sponge. The hasam afilu bishonim shari she'einu merapim. The sponge is just protective, and therefore it just softens the cushion, and therefore to put that on, in between your flesh and your clothes, so it cushions it, that's okay. Uduloi kadas hatur v'chein kosav ben yirabah v'ayim b'simin shin aleph Seif Chof Beis Shehetik Sham Hamacha B'Loshen Atur the Sfeig Merape. They, the Taz is of the opinion that a Sfeig is Merape. V'ulai Kavanas Hamacha B'Sham Rak HaSfeig Lach. Maybe he's talking about a wet one, but Tzarchian. But either way, the Mishnah Berurah says that a dry sponge over here would be fine to put on to protect some sort of wound. Okay, Chof Dalet. Yeah, so plaster is okay. The only thing you got to be careful of is kosher and matir. So, but generally speaking, we allow it. So long as you tie the ends, it's not like a permanent kosher matir. So tie it on your skin as opposed to each other. That would be okay.
Regular plaster.
Yeah.
Sticky ones. Okay.
Yeah. We'll say, well, what's the difference? But kosher matir means you're attaching two things.
I mean, if you go that.
I'll get back to that tomorrow. So I'll need to double check it. But my understanding is that I think you'll be allowed so long as you don't tie the two ends together, because that can be almost permanent, or in a longer term. I'll check that out. Okay, I remember Steinberg had a psak being matted, but I'll double check. Okay, Chof Dalet. Right, so I think that's what he talks about. I think he actually allows you to remove the adhesive tab on Shabbos. Yeah, but let me double check. Chof Dalet. Noisnim ole al gabi makkah b'Shabbos. You're allowed to put a leaf on a wound on Shabbos. She'eina ela Kashamra, it's just protective. Chutz me'ala gefonim shehem l'refuah, but not vine leaves, because that's medical. Ve'ein noistin gemi al hamaka shehu merape. And again, putting rubber or something like that on the wound is also merape, therefore you shouldn't do that. Says the Mishnah Berurah, chutz me'ala gefonim, v'uadin shar olim, and so too other leaves, hayeduim shehem merapim. Any other leaves which have sort of medical, therapeutic benefits, you're not allowed to do. Gemi, ayin be'el yirabim, the mitzadeh, de'ein chilub gemi bein lach bein lo, which doesn't make a difference if it's wet or dry, not allowed. Kein mashram b'bir hagra, ayin shom. V'ayin b'shabbos kufi beis, b'rashi, d'mamaschel shekoil, d'mashma shom, t'gemi yavish muktzah, nami have. It's also a problem with muktzah. Ach nuchel loimet the hachamar, shechin lo b'yayim, v'afil hachi also. Maybe he prepared before Shabbos and therefore it would be okay. Let's just do Chof Hey. We've got a few minutes. Retia shenofla me'al gabi maka. Imagine a person had some sort of wounds and he puts a bandage on and it fell off. Me'al gabi, and it fell onto the ground, al gabi karka. Lo yachzirena. Chazal say that you can't put it back on Shabbos. You had sort of done the medical thing before Shabbos and now it fell off and it fell to the floor. We'll see why in the Mishnah in a second, but you can't put it back on. However, nofla al gabi kli, it didn't fall all the way to the floor, but it just fell on the table or something like that. Then yachzirena, you can put it back. But if it was through a non-Jewish person, then no problem, you can put it back on, like in the outset. Says the Ramah, you can tell a non-Jewish person to put a bandage or some sort of protectant on your wound, on Orach, also but you can't put Efe Makla to Merape, because that is a refuah, you can't do it yourself, but you can get a non-Jewish person to do it. So, if the bandage fell off and it went to the floor, you can't put it back. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah. Because you might come, you might come to smooth it out, which is a problem of and therefore smoothing the ointment or whatever is on there, the gel that is on the bandage, could be a problem of memachik. Because that's not a problem of shchikas amonim, because whatever was done, all the medication was already on the bandage before Shabbos, so we're not worried about that. The problem here is memachik. But if it fell onto a table or a kli, then yachzirena, the it's as if it just sort of slipped out of its place and you're just restoring it to its place. Just bear in mind, he says, not to tie it with a kesher shel kayama, just tie a bow and that would be okay. When it falls by itself. If you actually take it off, then you can't put it back. They so allow it. If you're just sort of fixing it up to make it more comfortable or more sturdy or something, then that would be okay. Now this is a good chazara of some of the things we've been talking about the last few days. But through it, to put the bandage back on by way of an Yehudi, that's okay. Says Mishnah Berurah Pei Gimel, they must be talking about a k'tzas choyle, i.e., it's got to be category 4 and not category 5. If it's just mechush ba'alma, i.e., category 5, also, we said category 5, even through a non-Jewish person, you cannot get a non-Jewish person to do anything. So it must be, this is a great example of a category 4, where you can get a non-Jewish person to do a drabanon in category 4, because it's shvus to shvus, but mokum mixas choyle is allowed. Even though getting the non-Jewish person to put the ointment on the bandage and the bandage goes on you, and therefore it's an issa deraisa, because as we've said, this is category 3, because of chilish ein b'sakana, you're allowed to tell a non-Jewish person to do even a deraisa. Which is exactly what we said previously. That was the sif that dealt with the chilish ein b'sakana, which is nechlash kol gufay, or you've got to be bedbound, or a hospital patient. Then you can tell a non-Jewish person to do even a deraisa. Like we spoke about, the Iraq mixas choyle, because if it's category 4, it's just mixas choyle. The guy can only do a drabanan if it was category 4. Also litain, and you can't put Efe Makla after who rak is a drabanan, even though that's an is drabanan. Mikol mokam al Yisrael also below shinui. to get the Jewish person to do it without a shin is not allowed. Afilim cholakol gufay, like we discussed. Given shehu choyle she'em b'sakona. That was category 3. We said, we concluded, the various shittas in the Mechaber, we concluded that in category 3 you can get a non-Jewish person to do a deraisa, and a Jewish person can do a drabbanon with a shinoi. Seder. Okay.
79 talk about plaster.
Yeah. Va'afilu imahadek es hakesher ani v'yofer.
Next paragraph.
Va'kerech tachbeishes b'Shabbos. Tachbeishes is a bandage, right? V'reizel hadvika alidei isplanis. Isplanis is a plaster. Da'az gon shem izan Orach. She'ein lases kain. Yeah, because there you're putting the plaster on the bandage. Yeah. Va'af lahadvik mixas me isplanis leguf. And even you got part of it on the guf. Da'az gon shem izan Orach is also mishum shebeshas shemer des tachbeishes. Meise es isplanis me aguf mashir du alidei. Yeah. Okay, but you're talking about putting a plaster directly on the guf. That I'll check. Okay, beseder.